Darius Harrington was 45 years old, worth $28 million, and completely alone inside his own home. Not the kind of alone where the house is empty. The kind where you sit at the head of a dinner table with your family right there, plates full, chandelier glowing, and feel like a ghost in your own life. Like everybody sees Mr. Harrington, nobody sees Darius anymore. He built the Harrington Development Group from nothing. Grew up in Bankhead, Atlanta, wore the same Nikes 2 school years running, watched his father work double shifts until his heart gave out at 61. When his father died, Darius cried alone in a Waffle House parking lot on I-20. Not at the funeral, because he did not want anybody to see him brave. That was who Darius was, a man who carried everything quietly. On a cold, rain-slicked Tuesday night in November 2025, driving home from a late investor meeting on Interstate 85, the front tire of his Mercedes GLE blew without warning. The SUV fishtailed. The guardrail came up fast. Metal scraped metal. Then dark. The accident was minor. A mild concussion. A few stitches above his left eyebrow. The nurses at Piedmont Hospital told his family he was lucky. But lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling while the monitors beeped, Darius Harrington made a decision that would change everything. Before we get into what happened next, get your tea, get your blanket, because this story will take you somewhere deep before it brings you home. The rain was still coming down when Dr. Evelyn Grant stepped into room 214. She had known Darius since their Morehouse days, watched him go from a kid eating vending machine crackers between classes to the man whose name was on 3 building dedications across Atlanta. She was a neurologist now, sharp and composed. But when she saw him staring at the ceiling like a man who did not recognize his own life, she slowed her step. "Vitals are stable," she said quietly. "You are going to be fine, Darius." He stared at the water trailing down the window glass. Then he spoke, low, almost a whisper. "Evelyn, I need you to do something unusual." She pulled a chair close. "I want to pretend I have lost my memory. Completely. I will not recognize the company, the money, or my own name." He paused. "And I will not recognize his wife." She was quiet. "I need to know who loves me," he said, and his voice broke just slightly on that last word. "Not the company, not the name. Me. The man from Bankhead who cried in parking lots." Evelyn leaned back. "You are fully conscious, fully competent. This is not outside the bounds of a voluntary evaluation." She paused. "But what you find may not be what you are hoping for." "I know," he said. "I have been lonely for 3 years, inside a $28 million house. I think that is answer enough." Dr. Grant agreed. And just like that, in a rain-quiet hospital room on the 4th floor of Piedmont, Darius Harrington disappeared. Mr. Harrington stayed. The real Darius went still and waited to see who would come looking. What Darius is doing has a name, a vulnerability audit. He has removed the one force keeping everyone's behavior in check, his power. In its absence, the people around him will finally reveal what was always underneath. The first lesson of his story? Emotional neglect inside a wealthy marriage does not announce itself loudly. It arrives in small, quiet ways. Earlier bedtimes, shorter conversations, the particular silence at a dinner table that used to be warm. Darius confused providing for his family with being present for them. That single, common mistake had been costing him everything that actually mattered. What Darius did not know yet was that someone in his circle had been waiting for exactly this moment, and had been preparing far longer than he had. Word travels fast in Atlanta. Faster still when money is involved. By 7 the next morning, room 214 had a steady stream of visitors. Eyes moving too quickly toward the IV lines and the legal pad on the bedside table, as though cataloging assets before the auction started. Darius lay still, eyes glassy, face slack. A small camera, approved by the hospital administrator, recorded everything. What is unfolding here is called the exposure effect of crisis. When a powerful person appears vulnerable, the people around them reveal their true motivations almost instantly. Crisis creates a deadline. Deadlines reveal character. The first visitor, before Marcus, before Mama Gloria, before his wife, was cousin Jay Banks. Jay was 38, had not held steady work since 2019, and made his living posting TikTok videos about generational wealth from a Decatur apartment Darius paid for. He walked in like a man entering a store he believed he owned. He was carrying an iPad. "Big D, you do not remember me. It is Jay, your blood." Darius stared, said nothing. Jay flipped the iPad around. Stock transfer documents, pre-filled, a signature line at the bottom. "Before the accident, you promised me 40% of the company. You remember that conversation?" Nothing from the bed. Jay pulled out his phone and opened TikTok. Right there, 3 feet from his cousin in a hospital bed. "Prayers up for my cousin Darius Harrington. Somebody has to step up and manage things. That is just what family does." He posted it before he left the room. Jay is displaying opportunistic parasitism within kinship networks, the engine behind black tax, the expectation that one person's success belongs to the entire family. Proximity to success, over time, begins to feel like participation in it. The cruelest part. It teaches the breadwinner that love and money always arrive in the same envelope. Rico Thompson arrived 40 minutes later with a bag from Pascal's, Darius's favorite spot on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. He gripped Darius's hand with both of his, eyes nearly convincingly wet. "I am your real family. Whatever you need, I am here." Then he leaned forward. "You have 8 million liquid in Truist right now. Before attorneys freeze everything, let me help move it somewhere safe. I already made a call." He slid a business card across the blanket. "Someone we can trust." 35 years of friendship sitting right there on his face like a very polished disguise. Rico illustrates instrumental friendship, a relationship that was real once, now quietly transactional. The corruption is gradual. Generosity, once expected, stops feeling like kindness and starts feeling like an entitlement. Resentment disguises itself as opportunity. Before noon, Marcus came through the door fast. 17, long-legged, backpack still on, straight from school. He crossed the room and wrapped both arms around his father's neck. The sound he made, somewhere between a cry and a breath finally let go, was the first sound all morning without a $sign attached. "Daddy, I do not want to lose you." Jay stepped forward and steered the boy aside. "You are almost a man now. You have to think about the family's future. Somebody has to be responsible." A glance toward the bed. "Your father would want that." Marcus looked uncertain. He did not step away. What Jay just did is parentification through crisis. using a family emergency to draft a child into adult financial responsibilities before he is ready. It targets Marcus's love for his father, not his greed. That lesson, if it takes root, is more damaging than any stolen check. Mama Gloria sat in the corner chair the entire time, did not say much, did not move much. 68 years old, raised Darius alone through 2 impossible seasons of loss. She had long since stopped being fooled by people. She watched Jay. She watched Rico. She watched the iPad and the paper bag with the patient attention of a woman who already knew exactly what she was looking at. Her eyes moved to the door. And then his wife walked in. Layla Harrington was wearing the old gray hoodie Darius had given her in 2018, the one with a paint stain on the left sleeve from the summer they refinished the back porch. Hair in a simple bun, eyes swollen from crying, and not hiding it. She sat beside the bed and took his hand in both of hers. She did not mention the company or the accounts. She did not look around the room. She just looked at him. "Baby, I am Layla. We met at Ebenezer Church in 2008. You spilled sweet tea on my white dress and spent 20 minutes apologizing." A small, trembling smile. "You were so embarrassed." She told him about the chicken soup he had cooked when she had the flu. Badly, she admitted with a soft laugh, but he made it anyway. She told him about the quiet scholarship fund for bankhead kids he never talked about publicly. She told him about sitting in the car beside him for 2 hours after his father died, saying nothing, because she knew he just needed someone to stay. For 3 straight days, she barely slept. She wiped sweat from his forehead. She hummed "His Eye is on the Sparrow" while he lay still. She brought photo albums and described every picture like a love letter 17 years in the making. Late on the second night, believing he was asleep, she whispered, "I was wrong too. I thought your success meant you were okay. I did not see you pulling away until you were already gone. I am sorry, Darius." He did not move, but behind his closed eyes, something cracked open that had been sealed shut for a long time. What Layla is doing is secure base behavior, offering love with no guarantee of return. She does not know if any of this reaches him. She does it anyway. That anyway is where real love lives, not in grand gestures, in the quiet choice to stay and keep giving when every practical reason to leave is already on the table. Layla knew her husband was lonely inside their own home, but stayed silent because she assumed his success meant he was fine. If that were you, would you speak up honestly, or go quiet and hope things improved on their own? Drop "speak up" or "stay quiet" in the comments. And if you have lived through something like this, tell me your story. What Darius did not know yet was that someone had been waiting for exactly this moment and had been preparing far longer than he had. On the third morning,
glad you're here.
his wife did something nobody in that hospital
anywhere.
expected.
Thank you.
Rest
She
now.
slipped out just after 6, before the hallway filled with visitors and the daily performance of concern resumed. The nurse on duty noticed her leave quietly, purse held close, head down against the early November wind. She came back 2 hours later with nothing in her hands. That evening, Dr. Grant pulled Darius aside during a brief window when the room was empty and showed him what a contact in the billing office had confirmed. Layla had paid the hospital bill. All of it. In full. That same morning. Not with a credit card. Not from their joint account. With cash from the private sale of a piece of jewelry she had brought in herself. Her diamond wedding ring. The one Darius had placed on her finger at Ebenezer Church in the summer of 2009. The one she had worn every single day of their marriage. Darius read the billing receipt twice. Then he folded it carefully and held it in his hand without speaking. When Layla returned that evening, she sat in her usual chair, took his hand the way she always did, and smiled at him. Her left hand rested on the blanket. The ring finger was bare. She never mentioned it, not once. She simply opened the photo album to the page where she had left off the day before and kept on talking. Steady, unhurried, like a woman who had already decided that whether or not he ever came back to her, she was going to give him everything she had left to give. What Layla did is an act of unilateral sacrifice, giving something of deep personal significance with no expectation of recognition. The ring was not just jewelry. It was the physical symbol of the most important promise of her life. She sold it quietly, so the man she loved would not carry one more weight. This single act reveals more about her character than any declaration ever could. But then came the moment that nearly broke Darius's composure entirely. It was late on the third night. Marcus had gone home to sleep. Mama Gloria had dozed off in the corner chair with a devotional open on her lap. The hallway had gone dim and quiet. Darius lay still, breathing slow, eyes closed. The practiced stillness of a man pretending to sleep. When he heard Jay's voice just outside the cracked door. Low, careful. The voice of a man who believes he is not being heard. "She already drafted divorce papers 3 years ago," Jay was saying. "Had them drawn up by an attorney on Peachtree. She signed them and everything." Rico's voice came back, smooth and measured. "So why did she never file?" A pause. "Who knows?" Jay said. "But here is what matters. If she files now, while he has no memory, community property state. She walks with half. Then we make our move with the other half while the estate is in transition." A low laugh. "It is almost too clean." The elevator hummed. A door clicked down the hall. Silence. Darius lay in the dark for a long time without moving. He had had no idea about the divorce papers. Not a whisper, not a single sign. Or perhaps there had been signs, and he had been too deep in quarterly reports and investor calls to read them. Maybe Layla had been standing right in front of him, her heart in her hands, and he had looked straight through her because he was already looking past her at the next project, the next deal, the next proof that a kid from Bankhead had made something of himself. He thought about the last 3 years in detail. Not the way he had been mentally rehearsing them as evidence of her potential betrayal, but honestly, plainly, as a man examining his own record. The morning he came downstairs and found her at the kitchen table at 5 in the morning, sitting in the dark with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at nothing. He had kissed the top of her head and gone directly to his home office for a 7 o'clock call with a developer in Charlotte. He had not asked her what was wrong. He had not asked her anything. He thought about that cold cup of coffee for a very long time. What Darius is experiencing is attribution reversal. His fear, which he directed outward at others, has turned inward. He is now looking honestly at his own record. This is one of the least discussed patterns in long-term relationships: emotional abandonment by distance. It does not happen because love ends. It happens because one person becomes so consumed by achievement that they lose the habit of presence, and their partner, unwilling to compete with something as large as a career, eventually stops reaching. Psychologists call the result quiet quitting in love. The partner does not leave. They are there every day, but they have quietly stopped hoping things will change. Layla drafted those papers not because she stopped loving Darius, but because she had been standing alone inside a marriage for 3 years and could no longer see a way back. Then she tore them up. because she still loved him. That choice is not weakness. It is one of the hardest acts of courage a person can make. The next morning, Layla arrived earlier than usual. She brought a small container of sweet potato pie, her grandmother's recipe, written on an index card that still carried a faint coffee stain in the corner from the Sunday morning it was first made. She set it on the bedside table, pulled her chair close, and opened the album to a page near the back. "This is from our 10th anniversary," she said, tilting the page toward him. "We went to Savannah. You insisted on navigating without GPS and got us so lost we ended up at a fish camp in the middle of nowhere." A quiet laugh. "Best meal we ever had. We laughed so hard my stomach hurt for 2 days." She looked at him with clear, steady eyes. "I know you may never remember any of this," she said, "but I'm going to keep telling you anyway. Because even if you do not remember who we were, I want you to know the kind of man you are. The kind of man worth remembering." She turned the page. Darius kept his face still, but his hands, lying flat on the blanket, had curled slowly into fists. Not from anger, from the effort of not reaching for her, from the enormous, pressing weight of everything he needed to say and could not say yet. Not until the full picture was in front of him. Not until he understood everything. He pressed his phone quietly beneath the blanket and sent a single message to Dr. Grant. "Keep watching Jay and Rico. Something bigger is coming. Do not let them near Layla alone." Her reply arrived in under a minute. "Already on it. Darius, what I found out this afternoon about your finances goes deeper than you know. Be prepared." He stared at the screen. Outside the window, Atlanta moved through its Tuesday. Traffic on Peachtree. A vendor selling boiled peanuts on the corner. The city that had made him and nearly swallowed him whole, humming along indifferently in the gray November light. He thought about his wife sitting beside him every single morning, turning the pages of their life together as if she had all the time in the world. Selling her ring and saying nothing. Tearing up divorce papers and staying anyway. He thought about a cold cup of coffee at 5 in the morning and how he had kissed the top of her head and walked away without asking a single question. He set the phone down. He was almost ready, but not yet. Because somewhere in the story still ahead, there was a truth he had not yet heard. One that would rewrite everything he thought he understood. Not about Jay or Rico, but about the quiet, steady woman turning the pages beside his bed. What Darius was about to discover would not just shock him. It would bring him to his knees in a way that no accident, no scheme, and no amount of money ever could. Dr. Evelyn Grant had a habit, when she was carrying difficult news, of pressing her lips together in a thin line before she spoke. Just for a second, barely noticeable. As if she was giving the words one last chance to rearrange themselves into something easier to hear. She pressed her lips together when she came into room 214 that evening and asked the nurse to give them a few minutes alone. She sat down, crossed her hands in her lap. "I went back through 5 years of financial records," she said quietly. "The same ones your attorney pulled for the estate review. The same ones Jay tried to have the court expedite this morning." She held his gaze. "In 2022, the Harrington Development Group came within 90 days of insolvency. You know that. What I do not believe you know is how that debt was resolved." He looked at her steadily. "His wife used her inheritance," Evelyn said. "Her grandmother's inheritance, $140,000, wired in 3 separate transfers through a private attorney, structured to appear as an anonymous investor contribution." She did not look away. She has known the full scope of your finances for 5 years. She discovered detailed financial records on the shared family laptop back in 2020. She never said a word about what she knew. Not to protect herself, to protect you. She did not want the extended family learning the actual numbers. The monitor beeped softly in the silence. She paid down your company debt, Evelyn said again, slowly, because some things need to land twice. With the last inheritance her grandmother left her. The only thing she had that was entirely her own. And she did it anonymously, so you would never feel obligated. Darius did not speak for a long time. He thought about 2022, the sleepless nights, the dinners with a different quality of silence, more tense, more loaded than the distance that came later. He had attributed the tension to his own stress, his own difficulty, his own failure to be present. He had assumed Layla was pulling away because he was hard to be around during that season. He had never once considered that she was quietly absorbing financial loss to prevent the thing he had built from collapsing. He had never once considered that she was standing between him and the very relatives who would have descended the moment they smelled weakness. He pressed his eyes closed. $140,000. He remembered what she had once told him, years ago, about that inheritance. That someday she wanted to use it to open a small reading program for children in the West End. The look on her face when she said it. The particular warmth of a person describing a dream they have been carrying for a long time. Gone. Quietly. For him. Without a single word. What Layla did in 2022 is what researchers call a silent load-bearing act. A sacrifice so significant and carefully concealed that it restructures a relationship's foundation without either person fully understanding what changed. She did not tell Darius because she understood something about him he had not yet understood about himself. He would have carried her sacrifice as a debt. So she protected him from his own sense of obligation, an expression of what psychologists call empathic attunement. Understanding not just what a person needs, but what they are not yet ready to receive. That same night, just after 10 o'clock, Dr. Grant received a message from one of the deacons at Ebenezer Baptist Church. Layla was at the church, had been there since 9, and she was not alone. Darius was already sitting up in bed before Grant finished the sentence. She held up a hand. "Not yet," she said. "I have the security camera feed. Watch first." She handed him her tablet. The footage showed the small meeting room off the main sanctuary, folding chairs, a long table, a harsh overhead light. Layla stood at one end, Jay stood at the other. Rico leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Between them on the table, a neat stack of transfer documents with a pen laid precisely on top. Jay was talking. His body language told the story clearly, leaning forward, one hand moving across the paperwork in the practiced gesture of a man making what he considered a reasonable business proposal. Rico nodding steadily alongside him. The two of them working in coordinated rhythm, like a team that had rehearsed this. Layla stood very still. Then Jay said something that made her take a small step back. Her hand came up slowly to cover her mouth. Darius turned up the audio. Jay's voice came through thin but clear. "I loosened the tread on Darius's tire at the garage before the accident. Just enough. I did not want him seriously hurt. I just needed to create a window. Now that he has no memory, the timing could not be better." He gestured at the papers. "You sign these, we protect the assets before the courts get involved, and everyone walks away with something. Nobody loses." The room went absolutely still on the screen. Then Layla spoke. Her voice was low, measured, cold in the particular way that a very calm person becomes cold when they have finally reached the end of everything. You tampered with his vehicle. It was not a question. You are his family, his blood, and you deliberately tampered with his car. Jay opened his mouth. "Do not," she said. She pushed the documents back across the table without looking at them. "I know exactly what you think of me," she said. "You think I am tired and bitter and one signature away from walking out. You have been counting on that for 3 years." She looked at him directly. "But I want you to hear me clearly, Jay. I would sleep on the floor of that hospital room for the rest of my life before I allowed you to take one thing that man built with his own hands." Her voice did not shake, not once. "Everything Darius has, the company, the buildings, the name, he earned from nothing, from Bankhead. He did not inherit it. He did not fall into it. He sacrificed for it. And I sacrificed alongside him. Neither one of us did any of that so you could walk in here with a pen and walk out with what was never yours." Rico pushed off the wall. "Layla, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," she said quietly. "I am being the most reasonable I have ever been." She reached into her purse and set her phone on the table, screen visible. A voice recording application. Timer reading 44 minutes. The color left Jay's face. Rico's arms dropped to his sides. Layla picked up her purse. "You have 1 hour," she said, "to remove yourselves from everything connected to Darius Harrington. After that, I called Detective Monroe at Atlanta PD, and I hand him this recording personally." She moved toward the door and paused with her hand on the frame. "And Jay, whatever you believed this family owed you, it was never real. Not 1 cent of it was ever yours. It never will be." She walked out. In room 214, Darius sat on the edge of the hospital bed, with the tablet in both hands and tears running quietly down his face. He had staged this entire situation because he was afraid. Afraid that the people around him loved the money and not the man. Afraid that success had made him interchangeable, a bank account in a good suit. And what he had been watching, night after night, building its evidence piece by piece, was not what he had feared finding. What he had found was that the one person he had unintentionally wounded the most deeply was also the one person who had never, for a single moment, stopped fighting for him. While he was testing her, she had been protecting him. While he watched from behind closed eyes, she had been standing between everything that wanted to dismantle what they had built together. What Layla demonstrated is protective agency, acting at personal cost on behalf of someone you love when they cannot act for themselves. It is the marriage commitment in its truest form, not the ceremonial version, the real one. From the outside, this moment offers a clear reminder. Love is not a feeling that sustains itself. It is a practice, a daily decision to stay, to speak, to protect, made again and again over the course of a life. Layla had been making those choices quietly, invisibly, for years. It took a fake amnesia and a midnight church confrontation for the man she loved to finally see it. He reached for his phone and called Dr. Grant. "Evelyn," he said. His voice was steady now, clear. "Tomorrow morning, it is time for me to remember." What happened when Darius finally opened his eyes, fully, completely, in front of everyone, would silence an entire room and change his family forever. The morning of the 5th day, room 214 was the fullest it had been all week. Word had spread. through texts and phone calls, and the particular network that operates within close-knit Atlanta families like its own private broadcast system, that the estate attorney was arriving at 10 o'clock to discuss the company's future. So by 9:30, the room had filled up. Jay was there in a fresh button-up, iPad tucked under one arm. Rico had brought coffee for everyone from the good place on Ponce de Leon. The kind of small, well-timed generosity designed to soften a room before you work it. Two aunts Darius barely spoke to outside of Thanksgiving were seated near the window, watching the bed with expressions of practiced sorrow that did not quite reach their eyes. Marcus stood near the window with his arms crossed, jaw set, looking at his father with the particular expression of a teenager who has been told too many things by too many adults and is no longer certain which ones to believe. Mama Gloria sat in her corner chair. Her Bible was open on her lap. She was not reading it. His wife came in at 9:55. She looked like she had not slept much. There were shadows under her eyes and a stillness about her. Not the stillness of exhaustion, but the stillness of a woman who has made peace with something difficult and is carrying it with both hands. She took her chair beside the bed. She did not look at Jay or Rico. She took Darius's hand the way she always did, and she waited. Then Darius slowly sat up. Not the uncertain movement of a man emerging from fog, the deliberate, controlled motion of a man who has been watching and listening, and has decided with full clarity that the time has come. He looked around the room without hurry. He took each face in, the aunts, Rico, Jay, and then, finally, he looked at his son by the window. And then he looked at Layla. "Baby," he said, quiet, direct. "I remember everything." The room went absolutely still. The coffee cups stopped moving. The iPad slipped slightly beneath Jay's arm. One of the aunts made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a swallow. Rico straightened up from the wall he had been leaning against, as if the wall had suddenly become less reliable. Darius kept his eyes on his wife. "I remember who I am," he said. "I remember what we built. And I remember every single person standing in this room." Layla's free hand had come up to cover her mouth. Her eyes were wide and glassy, and she was shaking her head slightly, like a woman trying to decide whether she was awake. "Darius, let me say this." He squeezed her hand and then looked at her, really looked at her, the way he had not done in 3 years, the way he should have been doing all along. "I was wrong. I was wrong to let fear and work and pride build walls inside our own home. I was wrong to measure my life by what I was building instead of who I was building it with." His voice broke just slightly on those last words, and he let it break. Because this was not the moment to be the man who holds everything together. This was the moment to finally be honest. "I have been lonely for 3 years inside that house, and I let you be lonely too. That is on me." Layla was crying. She had given up trying not to. "I drafted divorce papers," she said. She did not whisper it or soften it. She said it clearly, to him, to the room. 3 years ago, I was heartbroken. I felt invisible inside my own marriage." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "But I tore them up, because I still loved you, because I knew, underneath all the distance and the silence, that the man I chose was still in there. I just could not reach him anymore." "You reached me," he said. "Every morning this week, every memory you gave back to me." He paused. "And I know about the ring you sold." She shook her head. "Darius." "I know about your grandmother's inheritance," he said. "The $140,000. I know what you did in 2022. And I know you did it, so I would never feel like I owed you. The room had gone so quiet, the elevator could be heard humming 3 floors below. Layla held his gaze for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and certain. You would have carried it like a debt, she said. And you already carry too much alone. What is happening between Darius and Layla in this moment is what couples therapists call a rupture and repair sequence, one of the most psychologically significant events that can occur within a long-term relationship. Research consistently shows that it is not the absence of conflict or distance that determines the health of a marriage. It is the willingness of both people to name what went wrong, take genuine ownership of their part in it, and move toward each other rather than away. Darius is not simply apologizing. He is identifying, precisely and without deflection, the specific behaviors that created the damage. The emotional absence, the prioritization of achievement over presence, the walls he built without noticing he was building them. And Layla is not simply forgiving. She is being radically honest about her own pain, the drafting of the papers, the loneliness, the years of quiet, while simultaneously choosing to release it. This is what healing actually looks like from the outside. It is not clean or easy or resolved in a single conversation. But this moment, this mutual honesty, is where it begins. Then Darius turned to the rest of the room. He pulled out his phone. He pressed play. Jay's voice filled the room, flat and unmistakable. I loosened the tread on Darius's tire at the garage before the accident. I just needed to create a window. Jay's face moved through several expressions in rapid succession, none of them composed. Rico set his coffee cup down very carefully on the windowsill and took a measured step toward the door. Mama Gloria stood up from her corner chair. She crossed the room with the unhurried authority of a woman who has earned every step she takes. She looked at her son sitting up in that hospital bed. Her boy from Bankhead, who had cried in parking lots and built something remarkable from nothing. And then she looked at Layla beside him, her hand still in his. Something moved across Mama Gloria's face that was equal parts grief and pride and 68 years of knowing exactly what love costs. Then she turned to Jay and Rico. Get out of this room, she said. Not loudly, not with theatrics, with the quiet, final authority of a woman who is completely finished. Get out. And if either one of your names comes near anything belonging to my son again, I will call Detective Monroe myself, and I will enjoy it. Jay left without a word. Rico followed. The two aunts discovered prior commitments. Marcus crossed the room and put his arms around both his parents at once. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Mama Gloria sat back down, opened her Bible to wherever the Lord saw fit to have it land, and smiled. The public reckoning was finished. But the real work, the harder, quieter, more important work, was only just beginning. 3 months will change a person, if they let it. January came to Atlanta gentle that year. Warmer than most winters, the kind of season that felt like the city itself was offering everyone a second chance. The dogwoods along Cascade Road had not bloomed yet, but there was something in the morning light that made even familiar streets look newly painted. Darius and Layla went to counseling. Twice a week, first separately and then together, with a therapist whose office on Peachtree had a fish tank in the waiting room and old issues of Essence on the side table. The kind of warm, neutral space designed for conversations that are long overdue. They learned, slowly and imperfectly, how to say the things they had spent years not saying. He learned that silence is not the same thing as strength. She learned that staying is not the same thing as healing. Both of them learned that a marriage does not fail all at once. It fails in the small, daily choices to say nothing, ask nothing, reach for nothing. And it heals the same way, one honest moment at a time. Layla launched a reading enrichment program for 3rd and 4th graders at Ebenezer, funded through a small foundation Darius established in her grandmother's name. She called it the Mae Francis Reading Circle, after the woman whose inheritance had quietly saved a company and never asked for a single word of credit. Marcus turned 18 in February and delivered a speech at his school's Black History Month program on the subject of legacy. Not the kind you inherit, he said, the kind you build. He mentioned his father. He mentioned his mother more. Darius restructured the Harrington Development Group and removed every person from the payroll who had been placed there as a favor rather than earned their position. He created a community reinvestment fund in Bankhead and hired 3 young men from the same neighborhood, the same corners, the same starting point, to run it. He stopped taking 7 o'clock calls from developers in Charlotte. He started coming home for dinner. Some evenings, he and Layla sat on the back porch after Marcus went to bed, the way they had in the early years, before the money and the distance arrived and quietly rearranged everything. The old porch swing still creaked on the left side, had creaked since the year they moved in, and Darius had never quite gotten around to fixing it. Somehow the creak felt, now, like something worth keeping. A small sound, a familiar sound, the sound of time and of staying. On the 2nd Saturday of February at Ebenezer Baptist Church, the same sanctuary where they had first met, where Darius had spilled sweet tea on a white dress and spent 20 minutes apologizing, where his wife had once knelt alone at the altar and prayed for a man she was not sure was coming back to her. They renewed their vows. The church was full. The choir was singing. Mama Gloria was in the front row in a lavender dress she had purchased 2 weeks early and pressed herself the night before, because some occasions require the kind of preparation that begins with ironing. Darius stood at the altar in a deep navy suit, no tie, top button open, the way Layla had always said she liked him best. And when she came down the aisle in an ivory dress, simple enough to wear and beautiful enough to remember, he did what the man from Bankhead always did when something moved him past the boundary of composure. He let himself cry. Quietly, without apology. He dropped to one knee. He held up a ring. It was her ring, the same diamond she had sold to a jewelry buyer in Decatur to cover his hospital bill, redeemed by Darius the same day Dr. Grant showed him the billing receipt, before Layla ever knew he was aware of what she had done. "I have been a rich man and a poor man," he said, and his voice carried through the sanctuary the way a voice carries when a person is finally saying exactly the right thing. "And the only time I was ever truly wealthy was when I remembered who was standing beside me." He looked up at her. "You are not just his wife. You are the foundation. You were there when I had nothing, and you stayed when I was so consumed by having everything that I forgot to see you. I see you now. I promise. I see you now." She held out her hand. It was trembling. He placed the ring on her finger. The church responded the way a congregation responds when something true and hard-earned is happening right in front of them. Fully, openly, without reservation. Mama Gloria pressed her handkerchief to her face. Then she folded her hands in her lap, straightened her back, and said to nobody in particular, "Now that is family." They stood together at the altar, Darius and Layla, her head tilted against his shoulder, his arm around her waist. the choir still singing, and the light through the stained glass falling warm and gold across the old wooden pews. His phone, tucked inside his jacket pocket, buzzed once against his chest. He did not move immediately. He held his wife for another long moment. This woman who had paid debts in silence and torn up papers and sold her ring and stood in a church at midnight and said, "I will not let you destroy what this man built." And he breathed. Then, when she turned to greet Mama Gloria and Marcus came forward to wrap his arms around both of them, Darius reached into his jacket and glanced at the screen. Unknown number. No contact saved. 3 lines of text. Do you really think you know everything about Layla? There is a secret she never told you. About her health. And the sacrifices she made in silence. Call me when you are ready to hear the truth. The ring on her finger caught the light as she laughed at something Marcus said. She looked back at Darius over her shoulder, eyes warm and full and real. He looked at the message. Then he looked at her. Then he closed the screen and slid the phone back into his pocket. He smiled. But behind his eyes, quiet as winter and steady as the creak of an old porch swing, something flickered. Equal parts hope and unease, and the dawning certainty that some stories, the real ones, the ones worth telling, do not end when the vows are spoken. They are only just beginning. This story reminds us of 3 things that no marriage seminar will put on a pamphlet, because they are too quiet, too specific, and too true. First, loneliness inside a marriage is real, and it has a face. It looks like a cup of coffee gone cold at 5 in the morning, sitting on a kitchen table while the person who made it stares at nothing, and the person who loves them walks right past. If you are reading this and you recognize that cup of coffee, maybe you were the one sitting there. Maybe you were the one who walked past. Do not wait for a crisis to say so. Tonight, after dinner, before the television goes on, sit across from the person you share a life with and ask one specific question. What is something you needed from me this year that I did not give you? Then listen without defending yourself. Just listen. That one question, asked honestly, has saved more marriages than any amount of flowers or anniversary dinners ever could. Second, sacrifice kept secret becomes a wound. Layla's love was real, but hiding it for years cost her. If you have been quietly carrying something for someone you love, a financial burden, an emotional load, a grief you swallowed so they would not have to, write it down this week. Not to hand to them, just for yourself. In whatever notebook is on your nightstand. Name what you gave. Name what it cost. Because love that is never acknowledged, even by yourself, has a way of curdling into resentment over time. Third, the people who show up empty-handed are the ones worth watching. Not the ones with paperwork. Not the ones with sandwiches from the right restaurant. The ones who sit beside you, hold your hand, and tell you who you are when you have forgotten. If this story moved you, share it with someone you love. And if you are wondering about the message on that phone, about the secret Layla has been carrying in silence all along, come back for part 2. We will be here. This story was written by a human, supported by AI. It's not grand, it only hopes to gently touch your heart. That even when looked down upon or pushed aside, justice may arrive late but never absent, and kindness will ultimately be rewarded in the most beautiful way. Production team story and screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Nguyen. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Nguyen. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.